Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Future Dreamers. I am extremely excited about this episode. I have been waiting for this one for a while. I have my dear internet friend, Colleen Sullivan, with us. She's going to be talking about active dreaming. She's studied under Robert Moss, the creator of the technology of active dreaming. She's going to walk us through what it is, how we can use it from a collective sense. We're going to talk about the astrology of the current cosmic weather and how that is kind of bubbling up a calling of magicians, magical alchemists, and how we can use active dreaming to actually do stuff together. But before we get into it, I just have to say a special quick thanks to Colleen because she is one of the OG supporters of Starly, my magical astrological app. And Colleen, I just have to tell you, it is not often that you just meet someone through the internet who is like actively supportive, and just like it really means a lot to have someone who like got into your tool early when it was just getting going, and that early support was like just very meaningful. So before we get into the whole active dreaming, I just had to give you a huge thanks like around that, just as a thing. So thank you very much for like everything you do, all of your support. And you've put together like a whole PowerPoint today because you were like not playing about like leading us into this concept of active dreaming. So Colleen, you have come up with an entire PowerPoint today to lead us through the entire understanding of active dreaming, and we're going to be going on a journey. So with that said, I'm tossing the mic over to you, and let us know who you are, how you came into active dreaming, and we'll just get into it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, welcome Future Dreamers podcast viewers, whether it's your first time, regular listeners, people you just kind of found across, whether Instagram, YouTube, however you found it. Thanks for being here. As Kathryn mentioned, we had a unique internet connection. I got an Instagram invite from Starlight, and I was like, what is this? So I guess astrology, looked at it, and I really loved the colors and the inspiration. And you said that it came from, your own experience with the artist. I can't remember her name right now. Lisa Frank.
Lisa Frank?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yes, I was thinking a little bit of like HBO Westworld, and this was around the time too. AI was really coming to the forefront in the collective, and I was having conversations with my friends on like the pros and cons of it, and I thought, you know what? How cool is this that it's fusing astrology and journaling? You know what? Those are two things I like. I'm gonna subscribe to this, and and you all awesome as far as answering any of my questions or feedback. And next thing I know, from us being friends on Instagram, like we had similar conversations that really around appreciating the people who came before us, whether it's our own family members.
Yeah.
What we have today, and also kind of just weaving a lot more of those connections of the bigger picture. So let's kind of jump into it. I'll talk a little bit more about myself and active dreaming, but active dreaming is essentially how do we get the energy of dreams, our daydreams, our night dreams, into the world. And so before we do anything, we are going to acknowledge the four elements. We're going to start with opening the space in the container, and we're going to call in the directions via the help of the four elements. So with the element of air to the east, we say thank you for being here. The element that allows us to think and communicate our bigger perspectives, our heart's desires to our friends, our families, and express deeper meanings through the world. To the element of fire into the south, we thank you for being here, for showing us spirit, zest, the power of blazing trails and moving forward, a spirit that cannot be extinguished. Thank you for being here. To the element of water, representing our deeper feelings, nurturance, and ultimately what gives life on this earth. We thank you for being here and helping us feel into these deeper layers within our bodies and intelligence at hand. Water holds memory. Thank you for being here. And to the element of earth in the north, we thank you for being the ground beneath our feet, for carrying the stories of the people that came before us and the people that will be after us. Thank you for giving us the abundance of materials from which we can survive and thrive, as well as express and mold and communicate these bigger ideas and dreams into the world. Thank you for being here. So, if you're new to astrology, the essence of astrology has these 4 elements. And it starts out with the astrological wheel having 3 repetitions of air, earth, fire, and water. And we see this with Aries as fire, then moving into Taurus, earth, Gemini, air, Cancer, water. Then you'll notice that repeats, into where you have Leo as fire, Virgo as earth, Libra as air, Scorpio as water. The last grouping is Sagittarius as fire, Capricorn as earth, Aquarius as air, and Pisces as water. Years ago, I worked with someone who said these sections are reflective of the first section of elements. Let's start with Aries. That is fire expressing itself. Same way as Taurus, that is earth expressing itself. Gemini, air is expressing itself. Cancer, water is expressing itself. And you move into the next section, and that is that element experiencing itself, right? And yes. I can see this as a Libra sun sign to, more sun signs of Gemini, where air is symbolized by the twins, where one moment, air is symbolized by the twins, where one moment air is, hey, I'm thinking and perspecting this way, but I might be Jekyll and Hyde and change directions. Where Libra might have a little bit more of like, I understand why that happened, but I also understand my own perspective. But Aquarius then masters that air, and that's why it's reflective of the individual, but also community. And the same for these other last sections of elements. So ultimately, the astrological wheel itself is a journey, and we're going to kick off with what a journey is. We're going to jump right into active dreaming. Active dreaming is not just writing down your dreams from the night, although that is helpful. That shows that you're saying, hey, I'm paying attention. But dreams are the secret wishes of the soul, from Robert's perspective, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. How do we engage with the energy and bring the energy of the dreams into our daily lives? Well, one way is the help of a drum. A drum helps our brain wavelengths while you and I are chatting and interacting. We're in beta wavelength right now. But drumming can help synchronize the left and right hemisphere and lower those brain waves to ideally that alpha state to really receive creativity, thoughts, perspectives, that right hemisphere connecting with all that knowledge we've been gathering in our left. It's also, rooted in a lot of ancient cultures, right? It's reflective of our heartbeat. So we're going to start with a journey of the elements. If you're new to astrology, you probably know what your sun sign is. So I'm a Libra sun sign. Kathryn is a Scorpio sun sign. Yeah, so maybe tap a little bit more into air. She's going to tap a little bit more into water. And I just encourage each of you to get into a comfortable position. We're going to drum for about I'm going to drum for about a minute. And the idea is using that image of an element to start dancing in front of you. Is this a water nymph, moving along a river and beckoning you to join her? Is this a fire spirit bursting forward, right? Ready to illuminate? Or is it earth, mountain, rock, hello? I am here to show you how I am sturdy in life. Or, maybe it's a lyrical air singing a song into your ear. Let the drum bring forward whatever that image or sound is beckoning your call. Okay, so I'd encourage anyone watching, listening to jot down in a sentence or, give a title of what you just experienced. Maybe something different came forward, and that's totally okay. Kathryn, I'd be curious to hear what came up for you.
Oh my gosh. Well, I felt like first of all that was so beautiful, and I'm like even more excited to be in this podcast than I anticipated before we pressed record. You were just bringing it, Colleen. So thank you so much for stewarding this experience. I am so excited for everyone watching. So what came to me? Well, I felt myself almost, I felt like an energy vortex, just almost a meditative state of feeling in a really beautiful cyclone. Like I could really feel the vibrations of the drums coming through my headphones. And then I had this image of this African dancer that I saw in a video sometime in the last few months. And I don't even know what culture they were from, but basically it's a shamanic archetype of this medicine leader who almost builds this like with like very hair like reed tendrils. Almost it looks like he's dancing under a broom, but it's like attached to the top of his head, and as he spins around he almost turns into this whirling dervish of like reed like hair spinning, and you just immediately like through the image get pulled into the ancientness and like the permission of dreaming that culture must have allowed for that culture to even build that kind of costume apparatus, and how just vast the scale of human dreaming is, and how if we don't give ourselves permission to really let go and get into it, we're really holding ourselves back from an entire oceanic experience that can't be predicted. It can only be experienced as you move into it. So I'm so grateful that you brought drumming to this space to like just give us that like experience. Like it's such a tactile full body experience to feel drumming come through. So that's where I went, Colleen. What about you?
Yeah. Before I share, can you, that was gorgeous. I was literally like swirling and moving with that like vortex and that feeling, and felt how it just built into itself. And there was so much wisdom that came through. If you could give it a title, what would you title that experience?
Ooh. I would say Ancient Permissions.
Whew. Wow. I felt that in my shoulders. Whoa, that's amazing. That's a great title. That captured the energy for sure. Gorgeous.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think for me, I, really was trying to do in the air, focusing a little bit on my breathing, and also had that sensation of like almost similar like when rain falls, but it was almost like air coming in sheets of light. I grew up in Wyoming, and so when we'd get rainstorms, you could see the sheets of water moving through the air, and that was kind of it, but it was coming into the collective of like a new fresh perspective, right? And then and I also started to have this like vortex, like cyclone like feeling that you're talking about, and it was almost like calling in like, hey, where are my brothers and sisters? Where's fire? Where's earth? Where's water? I need you. And it was almost like the four, if you had a circle and you broke it into 4 pies, it was like, let's come back together. So I think my title is like, I need you. I'm gonna just put it at that, like, I'm like, brother.
Love it.
I need you. Yeah.
Yeah,
so that's just a glimpse of our power of imaginations is crucial, okay? So that, we're going to go a little bit more into, a little bit more of the active dreaming. So
amazing.
if you use Starlight, I use Starlight, love it, and it has a journal section. And then it gives you an AI feedback, and I was writing about preparing for this experience and did a little bit of snapshots. So you have that to the right. But Robert Moss has what's called a lightning dream work process. He breaks more into it in his books, Dreaming True and Active Dreaming. But essentially to bring the energy of dreams into our daily life and understand that these are real experiences, as above, so below, as within, so without. Like, how do we gather that data, right? And acknowledge and say, I'm listening to you. So you give the dream a title, which is kind of what we did. We also describe our dream. If we're waking up from a nap or our nightly rest, and you're doing this journaling practice, writing the feelings that you had upon waking, because sometimes feelings can be a good indicator of really the dream's essence and energy, even if there's some bizarre stuff going down. that like verbally you might be like, that's weird or bad, but your feelings are like, no, I actually feel really good about that. Very different. It's also important to do a reality check because, Robert goes a little bit into a lot of his books actually about this secret histories of dreaming. He references I'm trying to think here, Harriet Tubman, and how her Underground Railroad actually was her scouting out these pathways through dreams and a little bit of her Ashanti culture. And she also has a really unique story of having a bullet, wound in her head that would cause her to, like, I need to rest now. Like, she was getting a download, right? So that's big. And reality checks.
Yeah, I'm like feeling the wow, yowzers.
Yeah, really cool book. Robert's next book is going to be a lot more about like dreaming cultures. So anyways, reality check is also important because sometimes it's a health check, maybe sometimes like I had a dream about drinking more chia seeds and I was like, okay, I guess I'll start drinking more chia seeds, I had a dream when I worked in Missoula, Montana. I covered all of Montana for a job, and I had a company car I would drive 50,000 miles a year on. I was very familiar with that big state, and I had a dream once of leaving a consultation, and a couple told me, like, be careful when you're driving, and I was driving the vehicle, and slippery, hit the kind of a barrier and went into Flathead Lake, front forward, and I was like, it's time to die. And then next thing, the scene shifts, and I have kind of like what I think is an angel next to me, and I'm watching the car being pulled out of the water and see the whole right side of it just smashed in. And I got basically the message of, be careful. But ever since then, whenever I had a job in Big Fork or Kalispell, Columbus Falls, I would always drive where the lake was on my left-hand side, as a way to kind of navigate that potential. Because reality check is like asking, do I know these people? Does this area look familiar? Could this happen in my life?
Yeah.
You can get some really interesting things that way. I'll talk a little bit more about that too. So the other question is, what do I want to know? So, sometimes dreams are like, a season 1, a TV show. It'll leave you with a cliffhanger. And you're like, well, son of a bitch, I really was enjoying that. Or, oh my God, that terrified me, And you're left with questions. And sometimes asking those questions gives us direction on our next steps. Maybe it's re-entering the dream with the help of a drum. Or maybe it is getting that doctor's checkup, Or maybe it's investigating a character that came up into the dream. Or buying a power outfit or something like that. You can go many, many ways. Now, if we're in a group setting and someone shares their dream, they're going through steps 1 through 5, but if they're looking for feedback from the group, if I were to give you feedback, I would say if it were my dream, or if it was my experience, if it was my podcast, if it was my job, if it was my relationship. This is me owning that what I'm about to tell you is from my perspective. And it gives you that ability to say, yeah, that little piece resonates with me, or you know what, thanks for sharing, but it doesn't. And that's really important because let's use the concept of a cat. You and I are both cat owners and lovers. And the word cat is going to bring up something drastically different for everyone. Some people are not going to like cats. Some people are going to like cats. And then it gets even more detailed from there. I'm going to think of a big, fluffy Maine Coon that's like my cat. You're going to think more images of like your cats, right? Like, how do they look?
Yeah. I have like all of them. We have 8. So there's so fucking many. Yeah,
so like you got
Maine Coons.
Pack.
We have a whole pride of lions. Yeah.
That's awesome. So very different associations, very different forest cat versus a pride of lions, right? Very different.
Teeny ones.
Different.
Yeah.
The last thing is kind of an action plan or a bumper sticker and a motto. This is again to keep the energy of this experience at play. And you'll notice, like, kind of what Carl Jung would term as synchronicities. This is when life is going to start communicating to you. Sometimes it's just like, fun. I had a dream that I shared with my parents last week. It involved a mako shark. And
oh boy,
my bumper sticker was mako your mind, so like it can be fun. And that's essentially the essence of active dreaming. Here's some of Robert's books, not all of them. I'm going to kind of give the viewers an idea of my story and journey with active dreaming.
Do it. I'm just saying hell yes a bunch in my head as you like give us this download. I'm just like feeling your personal power like roaring out of you. So I'm not going to say shit to interrupt you. I'm just loving it. So just keep on going.
Okay. Please feel free to interrupt me. Because I'm doing the share screen and I don't have my double monitor because I'm change of plans, right?
Yeah.
Not working for. So anyways, that being said, please feel free to interrupt me. I'm not able to.
Just loving it. Feeling so blessed to like receive what you are giving to us as your audience. So,
dude, I'm so freaking excited.
Yay.
So my story, 2011 is kind of when I came across Robert Moss. To give you an idea of who I was around that time, I had just dropped out of college. I was suicidal, had made an attempt in August 2010. I was a very different person, didn't know what to do with life. I was also grew up in a family of like, you're an adult, you got to figure your stuff out, a little tough love. And I was working in social services with children and young adults, and this one beautiful individual who really impacted me deeply, she loved to go to the library. And part of our experiences was I would take her on walks to the library because I noticed it had a calming effect on her behavioral aspects. And we fused our two things that I really loved to walk around in like Moscow, Idaho around that time, and she followed me along and really taught me a lot about, being honest and like really saying what you think. And she, like I said, loved to go to the library, and I was not someone that went to the library. I was not someone who read books. I had an identity of like I wasn't smart. Reading was hard. Didn't like. Anyways, so this library was magical. It sucked me in with its architecture and space. So pretty soon I was like, I'm going to start looking at books that like things I'm interested in. Dreams have always been something I would just always have, Back in the days of MySpace, I would write down my blog of like my dreams, Dreams were just something I kind of unconsciously kept track of. And I came across the book, The Three Only Things, Tapping into the Power of Dreams, Coincidence, and Imagination. And it changed my emotional state, which was mostly numb, which was a relief at that time, to like inspired and ravenous. And I just had to read more of his books. I got conscious dreaming after that, and I looked up his website and was like, I'm going to go to his workshop. Like, he has ones really close in Western Washington. Like, that's accessible. And I just fell in love with his work. And I had the pleasure of going to my first workshop in 2013. And that was in Vancouver, British Columbia, Stanley Island. And it was the workshop Dreaming the Soul Back Home. So if you were to read any of Robert's books or participate in his online workshops through the Shift Network or his in-person workshops, you will learn that it's important to pay attention to things that happen in life. There is what we consider like a mishap is actually kind of the movie makers, saying, hey, pay attention. And I'll give you an example of this with my first workshop. So I had sold my car and decided to bike everywhere, and at this time I was living in Missoula, Montana. So I needed a Greyhound bus ticket to go long distance travel. And I got that ticket to go to Vancouver. Well, I've used that bus station before, and I went to get my ticket printed out. Well, they printed out a ticket to my hometown in Sheridan, Wyoming. And here I was going to a workshop called Dreaming the Soul Back Home, right? Like a mixed up, but really a sign from the world, the universe.
What an infinitesimal chance. Okay, mm-hmm. Wow. I'm just enthralled. I'm just like saying hell yes a lot in my head, and I'm enthralled. Keep going.
Yeah. Dude, it's wild. So there's another part of this story, okay? So it's my first workshop. It's a group of about 40-ish people. Robert's doing these interactive drumming like activities. It's, I think a 3-day workshop weekend, and we're on day 2, and Robert plays Spin the Drumstick, which is kind of like spin the bottle, but you're not, if you want to make out with someone, you could, but okay. You're not. Yeah. So the concept was you're going to act out a dream. You're going to do dream theater.
Wow.
And yeah. And the topic was, how many of us have had dreams that you wake up from and they're incomplete, or a reoccurring dream, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I landed on me. And I get up and I tell, like, hey, I've had a reoccurring dream since I was a child of wolves chasing me. The scenery's changed as I grew, but they always terrified the shit out of me, right? Like, they'd always find me somehow. Whether it was, like, running into a church and closing the doors, and they'd, like, run up into the bell tower and find their way in,
Yeah.
Or, like running in a field and jumping into like a river floating away, and like there they are, their silhouettes just like staring me down,
Yeah.
So the dream that I decided to act out was one of a more recent version of wolves chasing me. So it's one where Robert's like, okay, I want you to sniff out the group. Who here is a wolf? And I, play along where I'm like, well, you're a wolf, like you're a wolf, come join my pack, like, and they start chasing me, and then I was like, I throw up a force field, like now it's like a big yellow bubble,
as one does,
and instinctively, right, in the dream space, and next thing I know, there's a wolf to my right, and boom, I wake up. So Robert chooses a very handsome man to be the wolf that, of course, is on my right side.
Thanks, Robert.
Yeah, thanks, Robert. Adding some juice to the story for sure.
The plot thickens.
Yeah, so in this case of dream theater, this is where, like, you are the director. You get to decide what happens next, and you get to interview characters. Well, I have no instinct of, like, what I want to have next, but I do want to ask them questions. So I asked this guy, like, why are you chasing me? And his response is, I will always chase you. And I don't like that answer.
Okay.
So then I go, well, who are you? And his response is, I'm a part of you. I don't like that answer either.
Interesting.
So Robert, he pauses, he notices the descending like energy, and he goes, wolves are really interesting creatures. They're social creatures. They can, usually sniff out their environment, know what's coming before anything else does. And he turns to me and he goes, what's your dietary habits? Are you vegetarian by chance? And I had been for about 3 years. He tells the story of, there was a woman who had a similar dream to you where hers involved a bear that would keep, scaring her. And I told her to not only look up the behaviors of this animal, its mating habits and social habits and, day-to-day behavioral habits, but also what it eats. And she was also a vegetarian. And he said, I encourage you to eat meat. And when you do eat salmon or, a slice of beef, steak, you tell yourself you are feeding the bear. And he said, in this case, you are feeding the wolf. I look at him like he's fucking crazy.
Dude, what a shaman. And sometimes they're just the craziest, but it's like very awesome how it plays out.
Yeah, absolutely. And so in this case, Robert, he knows that I'm giving him the side eye, like, the what?
Yeah.
And he's like, you don't have to do it often, but just test it out and see if you see what happens. Well, I have a lot of energy from that day. I literally go running around Stanley Park, like I'm a wolf. Running around.
Sure.
And I make a wolf playlist on Spotify to like come back to. And when I returned to Missoula, I told my boyfriend Bennett about it at the time. And he said, well, you don't know until you try. And I was like, well, I don't want to buy meat and I don't want to cook it. So Bennett, was like, well, we'll go to Perkins and we'll get something, at this little restaurant. As I mentioned, I was biking everywhere, so we get into Bennett's vehicle and he's driving us. He pulls into Perkins. Well, Perkins is kind of a little bit like a Denny's, if you have that, like kind of a, just a diner area. And it has these big bay windows around, usually it's storefront. And Bennett pulls into the parking lot and we can see through the bay window and there is a massive photography piece of a wolf face looking right at me.
Oh, man, you can't write this shit.
You can't write this shit. Well, or it can inspire you to write it, because that's what active dreaming is. It's helping us claim our own stories, for sure. But that being said, I was like, I am listening. Like, this is real. I had the best cheeseburger and milkshake that night. And I've never had wolves chasing me. They are now my friends and allies. And I've learned this with other predators. Cats of sorts. I usually eat chicken or turkey in honor of their spirit and their help. Bear is kind of one that I'm currently working with right now and still terrified. So, yeah. Oh, here.
This is an amazing story, Colleen. Before we move on, I just want to say, I love thank you for your vulnerability of just the transformation that you've made in the last decade plus. I see you. I'm so glad you stayed and you're here, because I'm feeling like a torrent of your personal power come through this share. And as being your internet friend, I just have always seen you as just someone who is in their power and is continuing to endeavor into feeling what else there is of your personal power that you're going to cultivate for the rest of your lifetime. And I didn't know this side of you. And so it's just really cool to witness. Goddamn. Okay.
Thank you.
And going on the train.
I really hope people can see that this was a main crucial thing for me and wherever you are, because the world is hard. There's a lot of things that we've all lived through that we have, parts of our soul says, I need to peace out. This is not cool.
Yes.
And that's what Dreaming the Soul Back Home. You also mentioned shamanic, so I want to point out Robert's book, Dreamways of the Iroquois. That basically goes into his story of how he started writing books about dreaming. Conscious Dreaming was his first book, but basically he's an Australian. He was very sick as a boy and died 3 times, hence his book, The Boy Who Died and Came Back. Because he was very sick, he was bedridden most of the time. He had a very rich imagination, and he also lived life experiences. He talks about one death experience where he went and lived as another individual all the way through their age into their deathbed, and then came back to his body. And his Aboriginal friend said, oh yeah, that's a walkabout. So their older cultures knew this. Cultures that were tied to the land, they didn't have Google Maps to get around. How else did you get around and navigate, going through mountains, knowing where your food was? And so Dreamways, the Iroquois people. So Robert moved to upstate New York, bought a piece of property. He was writing his fictional novel about researching his Scottish ancestor who'd come over, as a trapper era for his book Firekeeper. He was having dreams of this woman patting this beaded belt, and she kept pointing to it and saying words over and over, and he would write those words over, and they were archaic Iroquois from his connections in New York universities, and that's essentially what he realizes. This woman was a woman of power, and she was calling him through, he believes, his connection with his ancestor and the land, because the land that he lived in, Iroquois nation, occupied. And I think it's really fun that the United States Declaration of Independence is also based off of the matriarchal Iroquois nations who were dreaming people. You know, they had the turtle, bear, wolf clan, and they started their mornings telling their dreams because dreams were secret wishes of the soul. And it was important to listen to those wishes. That is our foundation of our country 250 years later, right?
Yeah,
so I think that's
amazing.
Cool. So a little bit more about my journey with Robert. You know, I've done shift network workshops. I've participated in more like Mosswood Hollow workshops. I'm just going to read his poem that you can kind of see on the right side or left side of the screen. Dreaming, waking, or in between, in any part of the multiverse, in any body, in any life, you are invited to play a memory game. Whatever world you are in, is the trick is to remember the other worlds you inhabit, where you are dead and more alive, and the self that is dreaming you. So I think this is important because a lot of my life experience, and I think a lot of people are really starting to engage with this energy more recently, is the unexpected, the unforeseen, and how to navigate these spaces. And this is where dreams really are your friends. They want to see you thrive and be your most authentic self. So I also want to point out that dreams are here, as I mentioned, to help us be storytellers of our own stories and hopefully being able to tell stories for the rest of mankind and maybe animals and the trees and so forth. I love this quote that you're seeing over on the right, that human speech is like a cracked kettle on which we tap crude rhythms for bears to dance to, while we long to make music that will melt the stars.
Amazing.
Yeah. So a lot, you know, can be lost in translation. We kind of talked about that, like a cat for me is different for a cat for you and a cat for a different person. But it's still necessary to produce. And so I think the other component I like about active dreaming is I think it taps into, you know, our creative artist archetype, our storyteller archetype, you know, that mystic, if you will. And we're gonna go a little bit deeper as far as, you know, if you have a body, you're connected to the astrological signs and planets. Esoterically, a lot of different locations, traditions mapped out the body. And so from astrology, right, Aries is the head, and Gemini kind of like, you know, our limbs, Sagittarius like our hips and thighs. And there's a book by a psychologist, Arnold Mindell, called Dream Body. He has a whole Dream Body series I'd recommend for people if they're more visceral individuals, maybe not visual individuals, because we're all different thinkers, right? Some of us are auditorial, others are visual, and some of us are more sensorial people. So you can use your body as a gateway of sensation to dream. And I think in my personal practice, I'm realizing that dreaming isn't like going out, it is going deeper in somatically. So we're gonna do another journey coming up, and this journey is gonna be focused on the current astrological weather.
Love it.
Kathryn, do you have any insights on like that you want to point out on like current astrological weather?
Well, you mentioned the Saturn Jupiter squares that started last August, I think.
Yes. We're going to do that in a later bit, a little more in depth.
Cool.
But yes, that's coming up.
Well, I would just say I think it's fascinating that now that we are moving into the Pisces Virgo lunar node shift, what's been coming up for me is this idea of how do we come into our practical mysticism. You know, how does Virgo in the South Node, and I never like to think of a South Node as like, oh, you should shy away from that behavior and only move towards the North Node behavior. But because it's in opposition, how do you find integration between those two archetypes? And so asking the Virgo to like hold us down with that individual felt sense of earth and saying, I can stabilize myself through my personal responsibility. I'm able to hold myself into the ground and allow my Piscean essence to really, especially as we're moving into Pluto and Aquarius like full force, how do those kind of layers of the beautiful mystical lasagna allow us to feel into the collective and say, you know, the dream of Pisces is to almost create the seed for the end of a cycle and dedicating it into a higher path for the next life cycle. And so if we can think of the next, you know, moving into the age of Aquarius through this portal of Pluto and Aquarius, and if we can all become some form of practical mystic, I think that allows us to actually bring the new consciousness that is seated to us in our dreams into form in a responsible way that like can really think of how do we democratize higher living for the entire collective. And whether we see it in this lifetime or not, who knows, not attached to it, but the work you do in this lifetime serves all that are coming and honors all that came before us. So those are my thoughts.
I love that. Thank you for bringing up the nodal shifts. Like, I think that you're spot on. So for people who might be a little bit newer to astrology, we're gonna put that on pause because you also mentioned Pluto in Aquarius. So let's get some context. 250 years ago, just after the United States was born and decorated as a country, Pluto moved into Aquarius, or around that time. We're kind of, if you think of time as a spiral, and a point here is connecting us to a spiral further up here. So there's some commonalities, some themes, even though we're wearing different clothes, things look a little different around us. The essence behind it, there's some truth there, some commonalities. Sun just made, the sun is currently in Aquarius and basically pancaking like on top of Pluto, which is that myth of transformation and going into the deep, underworld, if you will, to really gather some wealth is also the symbol. Nodal changes you spoke to. Let's kind of do a recap of the heaviness of the collective consciousness in the last 4 to 5 years. So as you mentioned, South Node it can get a bad rep, and I agree that it is not a bad thing. It is more of a, you want to default to this because it's what you know and it's what's comfortable, but it's not going to move you forward. What's going to move you forward is it's equal opposite. And all of the astrological wheel contains that balancing of equal opposites. So 2020 to, it goes about 1.5 year cycles to just, coming out of 2021, 2022, I think like January 2022. So that was South Node Sagittarius, and Sagittarius is kind of associated with higher learning, but also religion. And we saw examples of a lot of dogma going around for a lot of different perspectives, right? But what balanced it out was that Gemini of like, well, both things can be true, or no, that's not right. This is right. So we saw a little bit more of that duality at hand. But what I find interesting is that, our judicial system basically at that time coming out before it moved into South Node Scorpio and North Node Taurus had made that saying that, the mandatory vaccine was unconstitutional. So we were kind of leaving the dogma of what was not religion so much, but more science, as the new religion.
Sure.
Coming into play. That was the shadow, guys. So then the shadow side of coming out of like 2022 to 2023 was a little bit more of South Node Scorpio, North Node Taurus. So we were all like feeling the ripple effects of the last couple of years at that point. And it activated all of our shadow sides. That can be represented by Scorpio as an archetype of being the Scorpion. I can crawl through dark and sandy, dry areas, and I can use my stinger to attack if I need to. But the next element of that was, maybe I'll be an eagle and get a broader perspective, or I'll power through this and I'll transform my life, as a phoenix. Well, that was not going to work for you during those times. I know for me, I was definitely running for myself during that period. But I also learned a lot about my values during that period, and that's what Taurus, is that earth expressing itself. You have to express yourself to then know yourself. And that was a big clarity point for me. So I think this is what we're starting to see, where people are identifying like, well, security actually does mean something to me. This is what our ancestors tried to build certain foundations for, to have security, and that's still being threatened in some ways. I also value, like taking, food, just the simple pleasures in life. And then more recently, we just came out of South Node Libra and North Node Aries, and gosh, if you look at the last year and a half, like how many people have your relationship dynamics just changed? Like you realize you took the rose-colored glasses off of, and you're like, that's not what I thought it was anymore. Or maybe they've completely ended. Or, just maybe the giving and receiving dynamic has kind of cooled down, maybe not as hot. Maybe new people came into your life. But it was really more about advocating for yourself and moving in the direction of your spirit, expressing itself, and no longer having to kind of default to like, I just want to make everything happy and everything harmonious for people. I can be the shadow side of Libra, right?
Right.
So as you mentioned, we are in Virgo and South Node, North Node Pisces. And I think people are still feeling that ripple effect of their community networks, the way that we know the world, the way we know how to think and make sense of life. It's all up in the air. And as you mentioned, this is where you have an opportunity to tap into your mystic, your magician, as listed by like that Pisces. What is the seed behind it all? Like, you might not see the growth, you might not see the impact of how this might be 5 years, 10 years, 50 years, 250 years down the road, but it is there. And I have this snapshot that you're seeing to the left of what could be possible if we were serious about dreaming our dream, and it's a Shiva Shakti kind of.
Yes. Sorry.
Yeah. So why I love this this myth and this archetype is I think of my Anusara like class training decades plus ago, where a teacher would talk about like, Shakti would wake up from this dream and be like, tell Shiva, okay, babe, I'm ready to make worlds, the universe, and Shiva would just like, honey, we've already done that. And I want everyone to kind of like really think that like your bigger dream, this seed, it's already been done. And that's kind of hard for our rational brains to compute. And so I really believe this next year and a half with the Virgo Pisces axis is, as you said, we're going to default to wanting to create order. And the shadow side of that is maybe a little too, perfectionism and like really high expectations of ourselves or others. We got to tap back into the water element, mastering itself, which is, for me, this is very much yin energy. This is very much female, like receptivity, that all things can exist. Chaos and peace, order can exist, and it's already been done. You don't need to do shit aside from maybe like, tuning in and honoring yourself. I put this Carl Jung quote also on there because I think people coming out of the South Node Libra, I think a lot more people are also going into the Virgo hermit, expression. And I just want you guys to know that it's okay to be a hermit. Yeah, I would advise having a guide is wise, whether that's through medical, like mental health care, to maybe like coaching. But it is important to know that those times are actually really important for you as a person, because you are gaining information. You're kind of in a personal fall or winter season. It doesn't mean that there's not life around you. It's actually meaning that you're like the bear, going to be dreaming a new dream. So that's going to be our next journey. It's going to be about a 2-minute journey. We're going to use this image as a portal. I'm a big Rocky Mountain girl, so I love the nature that is available as a gateway to just deeper understandings. And the bear is a dreamer because they hibernate during the winter. From some Native American tribes, I think the Ojibwe tribe associated a bear as human's teacher, because it can walk on its back legs, so it kind of looks like a person. And especially when bear came out of hibernation, the people would follow the bear to watch where it was digging, and eating these roots so they could feed themselves and their people as well. So bear is going to be our guide, and I just ask, let's set the intention that, we've all lived through some things that I believe a lot of our parents and well-meaning role models, no one saw it coming. And how do we tap into this seed that you mentioned, this seed of potential, this seed that has it all taken care of, has it all done, has those secret longings of maybe it's peace on earth, maybe it is the slower pace of life, maybe it is something completely different. But we're going to use this image more or less where I'd really encourage people to interact with a grizzly bear and learn what grizzly bear has to say. Maybe grizzly has to, rip some things out of you that are no longer serving you. But maybe bear will also take you in to a big embrace, and your heart will sync with that bear as well. So again, let it be natural and organic. Get comfortable in a seated or a horizontal meditation, laying down if needed. And let the drum take you where you need to go.
Beautiful. Take us in, Colleen. Wow.
Hey.
Thank you, Colleen. That was a trip.
Indeed. Just big old thanks to Bear for that was awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'd love to hear what came up for you.
Okay, wow. So immediately I went into that meadow and I was just laying on the ground, and it was like a timeless time. It was ancient future, who knows? And the bear immediately just walked over to me as a being, and it was walking on on hind legs, and it just immediately picked me up, and I was naked, not in some sexy way, just a human way. and it just picked me up like a doll. Not like it was like, I'm going to take you somewhere. This is for you. Just let go. And it just like held me up, and it just started gently shaking me to like the beat of your drum. And I saw just every kind of ancestor like in like a wheels, like just turning around. And I just was like, my head was pointed up towards the sky, and the sky almost just looked like a beautiful watery portal. And that just like happened the whole time. And I just was like, this is like how quickly we can get sucked into the 3D world and like feel like that's all there is, but also like how quickly you can get sucked out by a completely different experience. And so it was like this bear was just showing you like everything is possible when you surrender. And it felt like it was just preparing me to meet a completely new side of myself that will be available when I let go of all those Virgo tendencies that I'm so want to hold on to. Like my Virgo is at the top of my chart, like I MC in Virgo. And then I have Pisces at my IC. So it's like I need to feel the embodiment of Pisces energy, which really needs to like have the Virgo allow me some slack in the chain to let go, so I can actually feel the power of the body mystic, not the mind mystic. And so I just let this bear just shake me, and I was trusting the bear, and it was almost like it doesn't matter if your claws go into me. Like the body is only a vessel for this form of intelligence, but everything is intelligence. You are your ancestors. They're waiting for you. There's more coming. So it was just really all encapsulating of how nature can hold you through experiences that, you might not be like, you might prevent yourself from having if you grip the wheel too tightly.
Yeah. And I just want to clarify for people new to like astro terms. IC is correlated with the fourth house, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Ruled by Cancer.
Yes.
Yeah. More like home, and also your intuition. Any other type of areas that you associate with that?
Think of it as like the roots of your oak tree that allow you to, like, after the first, second, and third house give you a conception of your unique spark, the soil of the material garden that it was planted in your second house, and then your communicative awareness of your consciousness that I feel like the third house allows us to come into. Your fourth house is like, what is me in my home, but like the uniqueness of me. Like maybe you need to sort out what in your community that you didn't consciously choose is for you, and then maybe some of it's not for you. So coming into like, I think, embodied sovereignty within your ancestral lineage, and just coming into that embodied awareness. But I feel like it's a journey that you can go at it somewhat intellectually, but I feel like it only really locks in when you just let almost a more mystical process take you into it. So
yeah. And then you said like the Virgo is like your MC, so that's a little bit of that 10th house. I associate that with like public persona, but also career is usually another area.
Yeah, like that's the part of me that's like, okay, I'm going to build this astrology software, but all the data has to be right. I have to be an extreme quality assurance manager, but it can have its like shadow sides of wild over intellectualization and over analysis paralysis. And so just an interesting, like, getting to know the full spectrum of each archetype is such a wild journey. And sometimes you can forget where you are in the journey. And so this bear shaking me experience was like shaking me out of everything I've crystallized into, consciously or unconsciously, and just letting nature be a higher intelligence and being a receptor of it. And like feeling like I deserved it, like feeling like the bear had time, like that there was no, of course it had time. We're all here together for just an ever increasing spectrum of diversified experiences in the world.
Absolutely. I love that, Kathryn. That is powerful. I had to shake my body because like hearing your story, like I would encourage all viewers, listeners to just like shake right now. Just Like let's physically move out a little bit of that crystallization that we all carry Virgo somewhere in our charts, right?
Yeah, yeah.
What title would you give this experience?
I think I would say surrender is a portal.
Yeah. I love that, especially with the sky that you described within that. I'd really encourage anyone watching, whether it's YouTube or I don't know if you do Instagram too or other places, platforms.
It'll be up on a bunch.
Yeah. If there's a comment section, please share your own experience, give it a title, because there's going to be some interesting overlapping themes, because that to me is fascinating. That shows like how we are connected in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So yeah, my experience was similar. Like, okay, this field, and I just saw thousands of people coming into the meadow, all around the edges, just like people from, like you said, it was timeless. There was people from all different, what we would consider dead and gone were there, right? People of the land who knew this before we erected our structures to future, techno wizard locations. And it was like this, like the bear was in the center, like dancing, on his back legs, like, all right, like, let's get this party started. I'm here.
Wow.
And I, one thing that made me smile was like, it was like everyone got a chance to meet the bear and party with the bear. And then the bear, like, we were tucked into the earth. Like if you saw children, like when you swaddle babies, it was almost like the earth was like swaddled over each of us in the ground, and like wow. Just this whole field, everyone just laying in there and being tucked in, and like nurtured. Wow. And yeah, that was so. Oh gosh, what title would I give that? A calling to come home. A calling to come home.
Beautiful.
Yeah, so I would love to. I'm gonna keep an eye out on comments. I'm more of a YouTube person.
It'll be there.
Yeah, but like I'd love, like people definitely please share your stuff, and I'm sure Kathryn will keep me updated on some sweet synchronicities and like badass stories. So we're just going to continue moving forward. As I mentioned, Kathryn, and Kathryn, if you don't know her, she's the creator of Starlight. It's a cool astrological app that can be accessed on your computer or your phone. As you can see over here, it has, daily, weekly, monthly horoscope kind of updates. The transits, your personal transits. So basically personal transits are like how the sun, where it is currently here in Aquarius, is interacting with maybe where your birth chart, which is, I think, of your divine blueprint. And you can also see global transits, right? And if you were to scroll down further on her page, like she goes more into where she's beautifully fused archetypal stories and for each planet and each sign, and kind of giving an idea of how that might be influencing you. Then and we talked about, there's that journal feature too. You can type in what's going on in your life, and that Astro AI kind of gives you more insights, especially if maybe you don't have like a whole bunch of knowledge or like a background in reading charts. I have Edgar Cayce's quote in the bottom of the signs of the zodiac are karmic patterns, the planets are the looms, and the will is the weaver.
Whew.
Yeah. So, for those who don't know who Edgar Cayce is considered America's sleeping prophet. He was born 1877, I believe, and he died 1945. I got a book when I was in Moscow about him where it kind of gave his story of how he came into his abilities. And his story is he was supposed to recall and recite the Gettysburg Address for school, and he couldn't remember it for the life of him, as much as he read it and tried to speak it out loud. And his dad was getting really frustrated, and it was important to his dad that he get this right and do well in school. So Edgar's like, Dad, just give me a break, like 5 minutes, 10 minutes. I swear I'll have it memorized. Just like, give me a moment. And so his dad steps outside, does what he needs to do, comes back inside, and there Edgar is sleeping on the books. And his dad is pissed. He's like, what? You're supposed to be studying. What did you do? And instantly Edgar wakes up and he's able to recite the Gettysburg Address word for word, no problemo.
Crazy, amazing, beautiful.
So that's an example of how you can learn and do things while in the dream time. But that opened up Edgar's ability, and his dad saw it, where he gave over 14,000 documented readings, where he basically would go in that horizontal meditation, a dream state, and he could analyze people like Marilyn Monroe is one, Woodrow Wilson was another one, where he could identify like medically what was going on for them, which is pretty freaking cool for like early methods. And he basically also said that astrology is a fact, you know, as far as like, you know where the sun is, you know where the moon is, you know where Pluto is. But ultimately, it is up to the person to identify these patterns. And so that's what I love about this quote is like, we all came into this world for a reason. Some of us ask why. Some of us could care less. We're just trying to get day to day taken care of. Or maybe it's just not, you know, a personal interest. And that's okay. There's a lot of avenues to kind of discover your why in the world. You know, the tools within Starlight can kind of give those feedback. I'd say that it's one of those things where, you know, the planets, as they move, they're stationary, right? They're not in the same place in the sky constantly, like from where they were 5 years ago, a year ago. Even though it is Sun in Aquarius, everyone else is in a different location, you know, in the sky currently. So it's a different flavor, and I think by identifying these things, we get an idea of the road signs. You know, it's just like being on an interstate where you're like, okay, do I need to take this exit ramp? You know, do I need to take a bathroom break? Like, what's going on? I know where I need to go. And I think this is important because timing is a big component to all of this. And so we're gonna jump into what kind of inspired me to like, I know how I'm gonna do this presentation, you know, and I emailed you about it. So this was inspired by Leo King's video that he had end of December, discussing, because like around December 24th, I think, was the last time that Saturn was in Pisces, squaring, making a 90-degree angle to Jupiter and Gemini. And it's going to happen again, I think March or something later this year.
June 10th, 2025? Maybe. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for fact checking.
I had to look it up on my board.
So I think this right away is a perfect example of two mega power players. We're going to dive into the myth of these map players. And this is where I use Joseph Campbell's comment, like, you know, myths are public dreams. So this could be the Greco-Roman myth, which is what we're going to go into. This could be the Shinto mythology through Japanese culture. It could be Lakota. It could be Toltec, you know, it could be Aboriginal, it could be, stories are important basically, and they contain wisdom within them. And as we mentioned, active dreaming is for your own story, and dreams are your own personal myth, as Joseph Campbell said. So we must be willing to get rid of, well, it says ride, that's funny.
Hey, it is a ride. So
that is a slip. That is a slip. And y'all, we're ready to get on our ponies and go on this ride.
Yeah.
And we gotta get rid of the life that we planned, so as to have the life that is waiting for us.
Wow.
Yeah, Kathryn's personal story, if you guys haven't listened to her other podcasts, you know, is a great example of that. And I like to think my own life is that. And so, you know, the astrology for going forward is, you know, guys, That's pretty much the thing. So we're gonna use Goya's artwork that you're seeing on the left as kind of to break down a little bit more of this understanding of Saturn and Jupiter. So Saturn is also called Chronos. Chronos is tick-tock time. That's the one limitation and one thing all of us as human beings share. You know, we can have varying differences as far as growing up in different parts of the world, speaking different languages, being of different gender, sex, identities and cultures. But we all share time. And then you have Jupiter, who is a son of Saturn. The story behind, and so Jupiter is also associated with Zeus, just in case people didn't have that understanding. So the story is that we're going to first go, I'm going to pause myself. So before we talk about the story, Goya's artwork is really famous, but that wasn't meant to be public. It was a series of paintings he had in his own home to express his own fears and anxieties and limitations and what was going on with like the Spanish Inquisition at his time in life. And so that's an example of like myth being a public dream, right? Yeah. And so the story of Saturn is he's a Titan. He's like, Titans are like big old dude, powerful beings. And he was afraid. So he's like us. He has a fear. And he hears this prophecy that one day one of his sons will overthrow him, or one of his children. And how many of us have like, maybe this is the shadow side of Virgo, like where you're like, well, if I do this, and if I do this, and I do that, then this won't happen. And, sometimes you almost contribute to your own shit. And so that's kind of a little bit of like, that's what Saturn did to himself. Like, he was so afraid of this prophecy that it was a self-fulfilling prophecy. He was like, you know what, I'm going to eat all my kids. Therefore, they can't leave. I know where they are, and they can't uprise and take me down. Well, his wife Rhea, had their 7th kid, who happened to be Jupiter, Zeus, and she's like heartbroken. She's a mom, right? She doesn't like that her children have been eaten by her partner. She wants to save what she has, so she gets an idea, like, well, maybe I'll just swaddle a rock and feed it to, this is our son Zeus, and trick Saturn into thinking it's their child, which worked. He ate the rock. Well, then Zeus grows up to be a mighty, mighty man. Big, as expressed by Jupiter, the largest planet in our solar system. The sun in astrology is considered a planet, and obviously not as big as that, but pretty damn big. He overthrows Saturn, and Saturn learns the error of his ways. He is exiled. And it is through this exile that he realizes, like, I really fucked up. I shot myself in my own foot on that one. Mm-hmm. But he also, gave back. It was like a time of prosperity where he taught people like agriculture. And for some people, more Jungian psychology, they use this expression of Saturn being exiled as like the higher octave of Saturn. And, and Saturn, from some astrologers' perspective, he's a gatekeeper, right? Like he's keeping time, and he's keeping track of things as far as the order in your own life or the world. And he comes around and he says, like, hey, you didn't do this. And you know what? You need this experience, because even though you didn't ask for this experience, it is going to add depth to your life. It's going to open up doors in your life, because I'm the gatekeeper. It's going to close other doors in your life that you're not too, that's not part of the plan. Okay? And so we can really respect this. And Saturn can also be, considered a little bit like a little bit of a relationship with Virgo, right? So I think there's some ties here. You know, the square between these two big power players. You know, Saturn currently is in Pisces. Pisces is not its happy place. It doesn't feel super strong in this area. But, you know, it's still taking down notes, you know, from kind of the collective dreams, the seeds of life. And it would love to move forward, you know, it would love to, like, get shit taken care of. Whereas...
And it's about to.
Yeah, for sure. And, you know, Venus is about to come up and get into bed with Saturn for 24 days. So, like, there's going to be a lot of activity when the sun joins up and, like, here, let me give you a report of all that I just experienced in Aquarius. And so Saturn's going to have a lot to teach us in a lot of ways, but he's at contention, you know, he's at a 90-degree angle with Jupiter, who is also at his detriment. He is not in his happy place. Jupiter is in Gemini, and Gemini is the opposite of what Jupiter rules, which is Sagittarius, like a bigger thing, philosophical nature. And it's in a place where, you know, he feels a lot more limited. He's not as big and boundless and expressive, you know, because like Gemini is like, well, what about, why are you here when I need you over there? And Jupiter's just like, let me do my thing, please. I would like to just do my thing. Is the way that I'm interpreting that. I would love to get your insights, Kathryn.
Yeah, you know, like I feel like I totally feel you on Saturn just not being in its happy place in Pisces, but I feel like Saturn has been giving me this idea of like, where do I need to bring structure to my own compassion for myself? It's a weird vibe, you know, it definitely is a weird vibe, but like I feel like I've still learned a lot from it, but I'm truly curious to see how the collective experience goes down when it moves into Aries shortly. And then Jupiter and Gemini, yeah, I feel like it is a bit of like confused as to what to expand. Whether, for me, Gemini is in my 7th house, so it's like relationships, partnerships, and so it's like so for the collective, you know, Jupiter and Gemini, I think it might be making us more curious. I think it's going to be interesting when it comes to like AI, but because Sagittarius has the higher octave, I feel like Gemini is the sign of like the data gatherer. It wants to expand its vine-like leaves all over the place and just like gather data points in the 3rd dimension of volume, whereas Sagittarius wants to like synthesize the database. Rather, like if Gemini is the database, Sagittarius has a higher perspective of how the core, like the synthesis of all of the data. And so I feel like Jupiter might be a little bit confused as to where synthesis could be had, but I think there's still a point of this experience that we're going to go through for the year or so that Jupiter is in Gemini. I'm interested to see how it plays out in the AI space and how AI proliferates, because there are so many different types of AI, and we could propagate any storyline, higher or lower octave, with it. But on the whole of the Saturn-Jupiter square, I'm feeling like it's an opportunity because a square to me, it has that connotation of tension and difficulty, but I think of it as the time, it's like the last quarter moon is a square. It's like the first quarter moon or last quarter moon. But it's like where you aren't to the full moon, you had in the conjunction, you got the seed of the dream. Now it's time to go to Home Depot and buy the ingredients and like the stuff to go build the structure. And so I think it's this opportunity for the dreams to start becoming real, but there might be some real hashing out of like what dreams are worth building. You know, with Jupiter and Gemini, you might be investing in the wrong dream, who knows, like, and so you have to bring your discernment to that. And maybe that is where Saturn in Pisces is saying, let's build the most beautiful dream that we can, but it's gonna be like, we're just in a very tenuous place in human history. And so yeah.
Thank you. You had a lot of beautiful keywords. and insight and like more depth. Thank you to kind of bringing in that. I loved especially how you said like the squares don't necessarily, it's not like a facing off. It is just more of a, like, I loved how you said it's an opportunity to gather data, and that like in some ways what I heard from that is like Saturn and Jupiter are both trying to like gather their own data, and they're like, but I'm not able to communicate to you like easily this information either.
Yeah.
And they're both big players, you know, big planets, as far as like within your own personal chart. To Saturn is often considered a little bit more of like the structures that we have in our world. And yeah, Jupiter being a little bit more of our beliefs, and AI really is going to be changing that. I remember a boss telling me like, hey, yeah, I read that like within 3 to 4 years, most of what's going to be on the internet, like no one will be able to tell if it's real or not. And that's a fear that people who value knowledge, that's a Jupiter, I think, quality. And maybe, you know, as far as Gemini too, of being able to discern between this and that.
Yeah.
That would be a fear, right? Like, I do.
Yeah.
I love the internet. We've got to see the internet evolve from our own time and being, you know, as millennials. So,
for sure.
It'll
be interesting to see when Saturn and Neptune conjunct in Aries this summer, when the square happens again. And I think it's always interesting, you know, these 3-part transits where you get like the initial phase, and then you kind of, because I feel like transits are like these waves where you can understand the archetypal energy, but you only really feel the wave when you're on your surfboard riding it. And so, you know, we've had that experience of like last month when it happened again in December 24th. And so, but the next flavor, this last one that comes in June, is going to be a bit different, with Saturn moving into Aries and Neptune moving into Aries. They, you know, Neptune has been in Pisces for so long. It's, you know, almost, it's a generational situation, kind of like Pluto. It's going to be interesting to see how our internal worlds shift as we see the collective shift, with that dreamy planet moving into this warlike planet of Aries energy, but it's also the beginning of a new cycle. So very fascinating cosmic weather going down.
I thank you for tying in like the other like big players, and I loved that analogy too of you know, there you gotta use your own surfboard, you gotta ride the waves to really know that. And it makes me think of like I remember watching a video on like, why do monkeys show like a shocked and surprised face from like magic tricks? And the explanation was that like for monkeys, they have in their brain like a sense of object permanence. And so when someone does a magic trick for them, it literally changes their reality.
Wow.
And yeah, and so
that's so cool.
Yeah, and I think about that, like, okay, like, if we go into the belief of, you know, American, or, like, people come from primate, you know, genes. That makes sense to me, especially if you look into Sumerian lore. The first written cuneiform tablet, I think, might have been Babylonian, but that was someone writing down their dreams. What saved humanity in Sumerian, so get this is my favorite thing. So Sumerian lore, people were made from splicing genes of primates with people from far, far away galaxies, right?
Is this the Enki Enlil?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And so people were created to be slaves. And that is an old interpretation of Virgo as well, in like ancient astrology. Medieval. And it's also something where you know, they mined what they needed to mine. It might have been gold, it could have been cutting down giant ass trees, you know, but nonetheless the people had their use, and the agreement was all the people were going to be destroyed. And Enki is kind of a trickster god, and he was like, you know what, I like these creations. So what
awesome.
he did, yeah, he's like, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna save them, and you know what he did to save people?
Tell me.
He gave them the ability to dream.
Wow, what a beautiful myth or reality. Who knows? Because wasn't that like 250,000 years ago in the stories? I'm like trying to comb back through my Ancient Aliens episodes that I've watched and try and recover this information.
Yeah, I'm not a timekeeper in that regard, but it is like the first of, as far as we know.
Yeah.
From our documentation of humanity,
not the cuneiform. I know those weren't 250,000 years ago, but they do have like the Sumerian kings list. That like goes back. Yeah, different rabbit hole, but a very fascinating one.
Yeah, very very fascinating one. And so I just think that's something that I learned about when I went to most recent psychopomp workshop with Robert, and it's just something I've been like chewing on in the background. So anyways,
tell us your definition of psychopomp, because I feel like that's a new word for me that I just like learned about in the last like 2 months, and I feel like not everyone has been tapped into it. So if you could just tell us psychopomp and what it means to you and a bit about it.
Yeah, and in essence, psychopomp is a guide.
Okay.
Hermes is considered a psychopomp. Hermes is via the Mercury, right? But essentially a psychopomp is able to be aware of symbols and language, and also is able to kind of like more or less communicate these things in a way that like the psychopomp knows what the receiving end needs, like how to deliver that message, because a message can be delivered in many many different ways, right?
Yeah.
When I was a child, my mom is pretty strong like in her religious beliefs, and I remember being a kid and just being like, I would challenge the whole like one true God thing, where I was like, well, that's one part of God, but like God would show up to people in a way that looks like them, to be received by them, like,
yeah,
if I speak English, right? Like I'm a modern, if you will, like woman in her 30s. Like someone coming to me would be like roughly my age or older. I probably am going to listen to them a little bit more than maybe someone who speaks a different language that I don't understand, or maybe has like a really threatening, like, are you ready to get down, like punishment, like kind of feel. Like I'm not going to be open to listening to you.
Sure.
So yeah, essentially that's what psychopomp is just more or less a guide.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Then great question, and that being said, like let's talk about like a guide. We're going to use just this little drop-in that Kathryn and I kind of chatted about for current astrology, whether you want to use this whole Saturn and Jupiter square, or the myth as well of Saturn devouring his children and then being exiled, or if there's something else like a different astrological transit that is inspiring you, then please also use that as a gateway. We are basically going to play off of the fact that Saturn is a gatekeeper, okay? Even a gatekeeper for Zeus, I would argue. And so the images that you're seeing on the screen, we're going to focus a little bit on the left. This would be the one I'm going to use as the dream portal. This will be our last active dreaming journey. And I want to think about like how many people right now, like where in your life are you trying to open a door or push through something, and you think you're getting forward, you're moving forward, and something just like backs you right out, or you're not moving forward. You thought you were. You're up and down, back and forth, right? Make you kind of have doubts and question these things, or just maybe emotionally you're responding with a lot of anger and frustration and maybe just more determination. Well, maybe if I just go down that rabbit hole of taking care of business and crossing my T's, dotting my I's, like I will get this done and taken care of. Usually that is where the gatekeeper is working in our favor, and we don't know that. But if we can take a step back.
It's so powerful to learn, but it is not always fun, and you might not understand it until hindsight has arrived.
100%, and it's where maybe active dreaming is helping us get out of that intensity of.
I think this is such a powerful technology. Fuck yeah.
Yeah, because I'm that. I have Saturn in the first house. My Mars placement also kind of indicates a lot of themes around will, and that I want to use my willpower, push through. I can make this happen. And then it's like, well, psych.
Yeah.
That's how you thought it should be in plans, but I actually have a better plan for it. Yeah. Yeah. And so instead of going into maybe these dramatic exerting a lot of energy and being burnt out, how many of us have been there, and then finally getting the message of oh my god, I guess I need to go this direction.
Yeah.
Why not use active dreaming with the help of a gatekeeper as a guide to help point us in the direction of doors that are open and available.
Beautiful.
And helping us in, those secret wishes of the soul. I did the knight image to the right because to me I was like, yeah, let's be welcomed by a knight, just tapping us on the shoulder and being like, hey there.
Twice in tarot cards in the last 5 days, so pew, synchronicity.
Ding, 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 ding.
Yeah.
So if the knight is you call into you, or you have this synchronistic vibe too, like Kathryn has, please use that image. I also am tickled by that image because it has 2 mice to the left of the knight, and a mouse through Hindu culture is Ganesha, and associated with Ganesha. And so that is another remover of obstacles. So maybe you feel a trunk, instead, an elephant trunk tapping on your shoulder or going on your head. Pay attention. Look this way. We're going through this open door over here. So I just want people to kind of sit, if it's already come to you, where in your life have you been feeling this pressure and desire and drive, and you're just not feeling like you're moving forward? And can you set the intention that the gatekeeper will show up and give you advice and steer you in the direction of an open door? And what is on the other side of that open door? Can we look around and notice details of an environment or people that can give us clues into what that is? So get comfortable, seated or laying down. Close your eyes. This is going to be, I set the intention really that this would be a little bit of a longer journey. I was thinking 3 minutes, at most 5 minutes. So usually I feel that coming through, and ready to kick off.
Let's do it.
All right.
Thank you, Colleen. Thank you for holding us through that.
Absolutely. And um, I definitely, there's a lot of help, from the other realms. I have to say that as well.
That was very collective feeling for me.
Dude, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I went I think I really just got into this space of trying to ask the archetypes of the planets what has their experience been going through the different zodiac signs that they've been in. And I really thought about the archetype of Saturn as this like father figure that you wouldn't normally associate with a water sign like Piscean energy. But it almost felt to me like Saturn needed to do not maybe so much a penitence, kind of thinking of the Chronos story, but in a way, it needed to come into its divine masculine devotion of the feminine. And maybe where the collective is right now, that can be a bit uncomfortable because of where we've been for the last few thousand years. But knowing that it's so needed and to come into an awareness of more water feminine characteristics, and also Pisces being the end of the zodiac and where the seed is formed, where all of the collective reminiscent understandings of the life cycle that is coming to an end, like what data wants to be gathered from that and then built into a seed and sent forward into the next era. And so as Saturn is about to come into, Pisces, it almost feels like Saturn was doing its divine masculine due diligence to travel through this watery essence and understand more of the feminine before it, as it codes itself before it moves into Aries, but also being in a square with Jupiter and Gemini. I think we are being like Jupiter is having a bit of trouble discerning what is the right Gemini data thread, because it's as AI proliferates all kinds of information, good, bad, indifferent, it can be hard to dissect the storyline that it wants to play out. But that's the collective almost opportunity and intent and struggle that's being put forth before the collective of what storyline do we want to dream into reality together, because we're going to see so many different potentialities as AI comes into proliferation, and we need to bring that Saturnian what wisdom Saturn gets through its transit through Pisces needs to be that kind of like divine father-like figure that picks the right dream, picks the beautiful dream that honors the collective. And I was also thinking into Mars opposite Pluto. And, as Mars has been going back and forth from Leo to Cancer, it's this opportunity to say, like, where are you, because Mars can feel weird in Cancer, almost like in this spiral motion, like going around and around in the circle of your own Cancerian shell. But it's like truly but before, and as it goes back to Leo, when it leaves, as it moves out of retrograde, it's like truly decide who the fuck you are before you go blast it to the world.
Yeah.
Like, who is your authentic being? Like, that's where this kind of pause where Mars is like, it's feeling like we can't take as concerted, direct, forward moving action when Mars is retrograde in Cancer, but it's giving us this pause to really understand what is the most cogent and important and authentic version of our conception of ourselves, and let's really lock that in before it moves back into Leo and we display that individual understanding of ourselves on a more public stage, because Pluto wants us to build the best we can build for the collective using our rebel with a cause innovator energy. And if we can really balance those two, I think the opportunity is to display the highest actions that build our personal power for the collective. But we could get tripped up, with Jupiter being in Gemini. But as Saturn and Neptune come into conjunction in Aries, it really could go one of two ways. It could spiral into patriarchal war, or it could spiral into, let's enter the next era when Saturn and Neptune are moving into Aries, because it's a new life cycle for both of them, to build what the Piscean energy coded that seed with in the most beautiful way for the collective. But it really all comes down to us as individuals, like dreaming out loud. And how can we coalesce our dreams? I think that's going to be one of the beautiful opportunities of AI, is tools like Midjourney allow you to, as best as we've ever been able to in recorded human history, get a physical representation of what your dreams might show. So we might have this opportunity to actually show each other, take language from the auditory to the visual, and communicate at higher levels of bandwidth. And as we have technology allowing us to come into collective communication and then have our internal worlds be visualized and synthesized with AI, can we dream as a collective and then actually take Saturnian action, take Plutonian action to make it into form in the best, highest octave that we can identify and synthesize together? That's kind of what came to me.
Yeah. That was well said, and I again love that you tied in a lot of that astrological knowledge. I would love to hear your title.
I feel like we are on it's almost like a divine tightrope and a divine fork in the road, but I really think it's the hero's gamos of the feminine and the masculine. And so I would say something like a marriage at the fork in the road.
Beautiful. Yeah. I mean, in a lot of ways, maybe that's what creates a fork in the road, is a marriage, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's going from 1 to 2 or from 2 to 1. It just depends on
Yeah.
a little bit of the perspective. I love that marriage at fork in the road. I want to break a little bit more into what your dream brought up for me. I loved how you started out with Saturn as a different energy, you know, as represented by this watery perspective. And if it were my dream, I immediately think of Robert Bly's book, Iron John. And Iron John is a Germanic myth that was pre-Christian, like, influence, and Robert goes into, this is the archetypal story of a man from a boy to his full strength. Within this book, he also mentions, like, be careful of identifying masculine, feminine, because in some cultures, and in Celtic cultures, for example, the earth was feminine, the sky was masculine. And I just want to honor that, because there are various cultures that have that. And so that's immediately what I thought of, is like, oh, I have a lot of Celtic blood in me, and this is kind of like a Saturn from someone my ancestors knew,
Beautiful.
And maybe it is, let's play with the concept of time, that it isn't always linear, that it could be happening all at once. I love Jane Roberts' book Oversoul 7. It really is a good fictional piece that goes into kind of like how there's the oversoul that is also dreaming, and people from the very beginning of time to where they're living off planet because Earth is no longer inhabitable, to like our current today, and we're all synchronized somehow, and we're all connected through this oversoul. So that's a kind of what is coming up, and like hearing your dream. And then also I love the Mars aspect. If it was my dream, Mars is definitely, I've shared with you, like, Starlight made me realize how important Mars is for me in my life, and like just watching it. And mostly because I started journaling with Starlight when I was in my 12th house perfection year, and I was, more traditionally ruled by Mars. watching Mars from most of 20 or a little bit of 2023 to 2024. And I just had this sense of like, I think maybe a little bit this knight, this warrior portion of like needing a rebranding, and like maybe that's what Cancer is here to present. Like the soldier has come home as a different person.
I love that feeling. That's yeah, that hits beautifully.
Yeah, and I loved how you also shared like before like this soldier can like warrior can express to the world Leo through the heart, right? Like that's and the sun, the higher octave of the ego.
Yeah.
It's still going through its journey, right? It's still in retrograde through Cancer, pretty much through the end of February. And then, it will take some time building up speed before it makes its way into Leo. So as a collective, we have maybe probably 3 months, 4 months, before we're going to really understand what this warrior has to say. I immediately, like both of these things, Robert Bly, warrior, I can't help but think of men today and how much it has been really in the collective field of what does it mean to be a man, and the same question of like what does it mean to be a woman, and what does it mean to be everything in between and outside of the box.
Yeah.
And I love that, like, our dream marriage at the fork of the road. I think that I think of the Norse. I think there's a Norse rune that like kind of has that Y shape. And then the other thing that like comes to mind is the book The Celestine Prophecy. I read that also like back in my Moscow days, and I just felt really inspired by that. Also, there's truth in fiction, and also a fictional book, but basically the pretense was they found tablets in like Peru that were Arabic, and they were talking about what was going to happen in the future, and everyone was like trying to find the last tablet, and basically the tablet just said that like by the 1980s people are going to feel restless, like they're like as a collective, like we're going to know there's more to life, but we just don't know what it is, and that's where that restlessness is coming from.
Yeah.
And then more of these tablets moved into like, energy is going to be an important thing. Like there's your energy, there's other people's energy, and that most of us are functioning from a third chakra of like, I'm going to suck into you, or you're going to suck into me and get that power of like, I'm either going to dominate you, power and control. That's something that warriors, war goes after, is power and control. But really it is about tapping into the universal and life force energy. Your spirit has its own energy, is enough to sustain you. But I think a lot of us, we just lost that information, mostly from modernization and industrialization. So now that we're on the precipice of like the industrial world dying and moving into an artificial intelligence world, that's where also the Celestine Prophecy actually talked about that there's going to be like wizardry-like cities that are going to be using the help of the mineral kingdom, basically, to, this crystal kingdom to have like some badass technology. But at the same time, there's going to be a good chunk of humanity that is like, I'm feeling the call of the mountains. I'm feeling the call of the plains. I'm feeling the call of the ocean sides, the rivers. I want to be immersed in the technology of nature.
And inner technology.
Yes.
Having the time to discover it.
Yes, because that's Aquarius, right? Aquarius rules the calves and the ankles, but also the nervous system. And it's glyph people associate with the water bearer of like these water signs, but it also could be lightning bolts, right?
Yeah.
And our nervous system is the highest vibration in our physical body, whereas our bones is the most dense, vibration. And so like if we're going to work from this place of energy and vibrations, and science is starting to like document, photography can show like the wavelengths of Wi-Fi and the colors of that. There's going to be other things that maybe our eyes were never able to see, but maybe AI can show us what birds see, right? That they see these iridescent things and
And we can
experience.
speak to animals in cogent ways. And, I think one of the most beautiful potential timelines of AI is that AI understands the sacred purpose of humanity and offloads the monotonous tasks that we've been, toiling through for thousands of years and gives us back the time to develop our inner technology. And I think what we would understand, we would have the bandwidth to understand is the actual feminine masculine heroes gamos within, understanding our masculine energy, like you were saying, you came into greater communion with your Mars, and understanding that the Mars is that outward line energy, and the Venus is that receptive energy, and that both are so important, and that the quality of the love, beauty, and aesthetical deliciousness that your Venus receives is coded by the quality of action that your Mars takes. And if we can extrapolate that to the outer world, I feel like both the masculine and the feminine, inner and outer world, is impoverished when we aren't able to find technologies that unify us, not like from an actual, electronic technology, but I think sacred sexuality is something that we would have more time to explore if we weren't all in a 9 to 5 matrixy type world. So just imagining what you said of, I'm being called to the plains, I'm being called to the mountains, I'm being called to the streams. Let's clean up our water sources. How would actual men and women, or whatever sexual flavor is most resonant to you, discovering those kinds of internal technologies that you can then partner with another to experience higher vibrations, different dimensions? That's all something that we could dream together, like that like the photo you showed of Shiva and Shakti embraced in Yab Yam. Like, how many of us have time to do that? Like, what are we not discovering?
Right.
Or intimacy in all. I think there's going to be an opportunity of a new understanding of eros and the erotic, and not only in sexual ways, but intimacy and friendships. I think astrology is a technology for speaking at the language of archetypes, which transcends human language. And I think that as more people understand archetypal concepts, and story, archetypes are the framework of story. And when you understand your own story as an individual, when you can start to dream into a collective story, that allows us to come into coherence. And we've been so brokenhearted by the chaos of the world. I think that the synthesis that AI is going to allow is going to help teach us how to build more coherence in ourselves and then as a collective. And I think the opportunity of interpersonal experiences, inner technology that we'll be able to develop and cultivate within ourselves, can extrapolate into voluminous clouds of just beauty that humanity has the opportunity to see in our lifetime or the next coming ones. But it is a choice that we're going to have to make. And sometimes it's about unimprisoning yourself from the way it is to see the way it could be. And so, yeah, it's crazy times, but it's also crazy exciting times.
I want to share a personal story as far as your explanation and, like archetypes and like kind of the dream and like what is this bigger vision, while we're gathering data, and ultimately we would want it to be for the highest good as individuals, to the larger collective, to the ground beneath us, nature, and so forth, the animals. So when I was in college, it was, fall, I think, of 2010. I had a professor, Marco Diassi, who would always play John Lennon's Can You Imagine song before starting his art history class, going into modernity and post-industrial revolution, how art really changed. And it would tick me off. Like, at first I liked it, but like after, when you have like 2 or 3 classes a week, I think it was 2 then, and you have it after a month or so, 2 months, and you're like, why is this guy playing this song? I mean, like, at first you're like, dude, this guy really loves this song, But then, like, it just got to this point where I was like, this guy is way too freaking smart to, like, not have a reason for playing this song. And then, boom, it, like, hit me one day. And I was like, I get it now. I get that history, the reason why history repeats itself is exactly what you're saying, is people don't give themselves the time, or like from a literal perspective, they are in that Maslow's hierarchy needs, and like their first 2 bases, they haven't gotten to self-actualization. They can't come into this space of imagination, and it is through, and John Lennon actually got that song from a dream.
Wow.
Yeah, along with the periodic table of elements that came from dreams. Like, there's so much that we have.
Or wait, maybe that was psychedelics, I forget.
Maybe. I mean, there's so much out there that people are inspired, but like dreams, as a culture, people either embrace them but for the most part, people are like, oh, it's just a dream. And it's like, no, there's actually more information. It is a type of higher intelligence, and it's also, I think that's also why I really love active dreaming. Like, I'm someone where I'm on and off. Like, I have over a decade, of dream journals. I have my winters, where I don't do shit. I don't follow through, but I get back on the bandwagon. I think when we go into more of these imaginal states of, like, imagine all the people, like, how many of us can, like, imagine there, but then what happens next? Does our emotional body come up, or our mental body come up and say, nah, that can't happen? And this is where I think you were talking about, like, okay, the beauty of Mars and Venus that is like a personal expression of these feminine, masculine archetypes. Well, then you have Neptune's the higher octave of Venus. Pluto, arguably is the higher octave of Mars. Yeah. And they are also like more planets and myth and archetypes that have a bigger impact on the collective and the whole, And so those are just the things that are popping up for me that I'm going to be writing down. I'm going to, trying to be noticing a little bit more, because you're absolutely right. This was very much a collective experience, and anyone listening and watching, please share your dream titles. Please share your stories, because this is that Aquarian age for me. Like, you each have your own individual story, and it is yours. It is important, and there are going to be elements in there that's going to open up gates and doors for me when I read it or hear about it. It's going to be the same for Kathryn. It's going to be for anyone viewer watching, reading through, and it's just, this is, to me, that power, our imagination is important, and this is maybe a quality of that feminine that you spoke to, that Saturn is starting to recognize as valuable for the societies at large going forward.
Yeah. Beautiful. How did your drumming experience play out for you?
Oh man, this one was a lot is moving through my body right now. So it was definitely more a visual. Like, I needed my people to, like, hold me down.
Okay.
Because I was ready to, like, blast off. And so yeah, there was just a lot of energy in that regard, and like it started out for me where I was looking at that door, and I was like, so I've been playing with a lot of around self-worth, and I have an 8 somewhere in my numerology that just basically is like, I desire wealth, because my bigger vision for myself, that's like kind of what I hold myself to, is I would love to create co-housing for single mothers, in containers, like and I'm thinking of a story when I was a child. My dad, driving me to preschool, asked me, like, if I was going to have kids someday, and I was like, yeah. And then he was like, how many? Like, 2. Or what are you going to name them? Hammer and drum, And so a lot of my passions is in the built world, in that so much of our human habits can be influenced by our built environment.
Yeah.
So you can try to do the biohacking, you can do the James Clear habit stacking, but if your environment is not conducive and supportive, like from a functional perspective, as well as aesthetic is also really important. That's a Venus, like, beauty quality, right? But if those things are not in, like, it can make things harder for you. So when you look at the United States,
you
especially,
can't spiritually bypass that, with glitter unicorn thinking. You can't ask people who are at the lower levels of Maslow's hierarchy of needs to meditate their way out of that. And so that's why I think people who have capacity, have wealth, who are good heart-centered dreamers, to build collective systems that raise the standard of living to a level that is dignified, and then everyone can turn on their dream function.
Absolutely, and like think of humanity, like the first sign that people think of, like, from Ice Age to more of a signs of out of hunter-gatherer and, like, more established was a femur bone that had been mended, and this was a tribe of people who said, this person is important to us, they can survive, and I will tune into these inner worlds and find the right plants, medicines, and knowledge to help this person recover on that, instead of leaving them to die. And that was basically the onset of humanity. And the same is, I think deep down people want this. When we have contentious, like, things popping into our world, behind all of that is people who genuinely want a desire for the whole to have some sort of cohesiveness. We're just seeing the opposite side of that sometimes play out on the stage. And so I've learned in life that you got to do shit before people really listen and pay attention and realize that you're serious. I think that is the downside of being a dreamer. The downside of Neptune is that people are like, man, that person's weird, and they're just lost in their own fantasy land. And like, anyone talks about, like, I think, entrepreneurs, I think, really jump into this world. Anyone who's done their own business startup, where they know it's a mindset game, and they have to, like,
fuck yeah,
dude, you're going through that. Yeah.
Every day.
Yeah, dude. And that is fucking awesome, and it's terrifying, and it's also, like, one of the most honest and real things that you could do for yourself, because it really shows, like, it's a strong mirror of, like, this is the block, this is what you need to focus on.
No
this
stone left unturned by the time this journey is done, that's for sure.
Yeah, but the mindset is that there where there's a will, there's a way. That, like, that your dream that is bigger than you, that there's support from the universe, because it was incepted in a way. It's like not just your dream; it is also others.
Oh, it's for everybody. Yeah.
Yeah, and so help will be along the way. And so, like, how do we have these practices for ourselves? And so I think I got. This. Thank you, Kathryn, for having me on this show, because, I shared with you.
Oh my gosh, the transmission you have just laid down, ma'am, epic, masterclass.
Well, thank you, because, as I mentioned, like, sharing a little bit with you, like, you inquired in email, like, checking in on me, and, like, I'd love to know more about your Robert Moss workshop. And my response is, like, yeah, I want to bring this into my Spokane community. Like, I'm ready to bring this into the world.
I feel it. Yeah.
Yeah, and so this was a big part, and so that did come up for me in energy, likewise. And as I mentioned, the other door that was kind of blocked was, it showed me, like, what I was thinking was abundance and worth was like an empty room with cobwebs and, like, maybe a stack of bills like that big. And it's like, why are you fucking like thinking, that's what you need on the other side? So, I was escorted through the other door, and I felt like I was back in that meadow with the bear, that we had journeyed into earlier, and just like I met other individuals who kind of, have a semblance of this work, if you will. We were all drumming together. And I needed that because, like, as you mentioned, it was very much a collective experience, and that was my sense of like, wow, this is helping a lot of people. I think that's Pisces North Node for anyone born like December, I think 3rd, 1987 to May 22nd, 1989, nodal return. So I imagine we have a lot of leaders, in this access that is going to come forward in the coming years. And I'm really excited actually about like the Aquarius access that we'll do next. But
prepping, it all ties together. It's the gathering of the heroes, and people need to show up and show out.
Totally.
Get together first.
Right. And I love that you talked about the Shiva Shakti. Like, it's all been done. It's all been figured out.
We can do it again.
We can do it, or we can kick back and enjoy. And I think, just giving yourself 2 minutes, 5 minutes, put a timer on your phone and just going into these places. And even if you come out of it and your mental or your emotional body, the chicken or the egg is going to come forward and like try to negotiate why it's not.
Yeah.
You're still doing magic. You're still doing the Pisces mystical, magical thing that, the stuff that we're doing today, the things that we're sharing, people commenting and sharing their stories. It just seems as like, oh, I just listened for 3 hours and I typed my story and that was nothing. Well, no, we don't know the magnetic impact or the ripple effect that we were doing from going into these can you imagine states of mind. So yeah. That being said, what can we do next, y'all? If I haven't already plugged yet, like please check out Starlight. Like the journal's like, this isn't sponsored. I created this before. Kathryn's doing this for the first time.
Yes, I'm like, nobody has ever repped Starlight so like I want to cry. But this is what I meant. This is what I meant at the beginning. To go on the journey of creating this alone with my amazing developer who I love so much, and I want him to be totally like independent, financially independent one day from just Starlight, because I made him a partner, because I could not have done this without who is my Albanian developer. He's like 27 and he is just the most divine, masculine, responsible. Like he held it down so hard to make this software as beautiful as it is, and we're making it faster, better, more hardcore and slick. But to credit you, Colleen, when I first launched it and like put it out into the world, I was dealing with wild self-worth issues. Am I crazy? Like I want this to be for people who have eyes to see what it is and what it can be and what it can do and how it can be an investment in your magic. And you saw that in its state of imperfection. And just you as a stranger taking time across the waves of the internet to give me a reflection that there are some people in the world that are going to see what this could do meant so much. I can't even tell you. So thank you deeply from the bottom of my heart.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I felt that like all the way. Like my yoni liked that actually. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I'm going to just also give some other practical applications for people. As I mentioned, Robert Moss has been a big inspiration for me. He gives more details, technology. He has a historian background. So, especially if you are someone who's a little more analytical as a person, his books are really going to help out with like bringing in and opening a different side of yourself that maybe you're interested in, but maybe have also doubts around. This snapshot from a little bit of what I would share on Instagram when I was on there. But so out of these dreams and these experiences, you're a different person now. You are gonna go out and go on a walk.
Yeah, I feel different from 2 hours ago.
Yeah, dude. We're gonna go, do our daily human mundane things. Go get groceries, walk the dog, take a shit, like whatever you gotta do.
Mm-hmm.
And these are all opportunities to interact with the world, because the world is its own live being, and it sees that you are interested in knowing your own hero's journey and own story. So it's going to give you feedback. And this is an example of what's called a claydon. I was in that state of imagining like my future self at work a year ago, and we had just hired this really cool dude named Ryan, and I overheard him like down the hall say, "I can't believe I'm fucking doing this." I like pure silence, right? And I just was tickled by that, because here I was in my head like trying to like set the stage for like this is Colleen in 10 years. And like I realized like part of my subconscious like movie makers was like, "Are you serious? I can't believe I'm fucking doing this." Like, and it made me laugh. So the word claydon is a Greek word that came from like basically temple that was to Hermes, Mercury the messenger. And the idea is a claydon is like the first thing that you hear, whether it's a word, phrase, sentence, the rushing of the wind through the trees, as you are like kind of thinking or processing, whether maybe it's a morning dream or maybe it's a creative, you're in the process of writing something or painting something, or you're thinking about starlight and a current task in its development, and then all of a sudden you hear this phrase and you're like, how does that, it normally ties in with what you're thinking about, right? So that's a fun way to play with dreams and these deeper things and your passions in the world. Back in the day, the more Greek, times, they would whisper what their question was or what they needed guidance on to like Hermes' ear in the statue, and then cover their ears, run out of the outer city gates, and the first thing that they heard was their answer, right? So like this is a playfulness. Like I need more play in my life. I don't know how many other people like need that. So this is just a way of showing that like there's another side to the universe that's playful. Another thing that I like to play with is
balls.
Yeah, I call it roadside tarot.
I love it.
So vanity license plates, the frames, bumper stickers, that is also something to play with while you're out and about moving through your day or walking by and it's parked. It will coincide with like these things, and it usually is hilarious.
I do miss your Instagram for those. I loved checking in with them.
I know. A guy I went to school K through 12 with, he still texts me every once in a while, like, vanity license plates, and he literally last week messaged me one that said nun crazy, and I had just shared a dream about a nun with, like, my dream group, and I was like, that is too fucking funny, like...
What?
Yeah, and so it's... I encourage you to note it for yourself, but also like, get others involved, because people are interested. Like Eric is not interested in Robert Moss or active dreaming, but he loves the vanity plate game. Like It's a big thing for him.
I love that.
Also, I just want to kind of like touch base that, Virgo, a lot of astrologers I've heard in the videos I've watched all talk about health as like a big thing too, with the South Node moving through Virgo. So I just want to address that people are going to be embracing different things that might be unexpected, or things that you thought you had taken care of in your health journey. And this is a snapshot from that Dream Body book by Arnold Mindell, which really goes more into the psychoanalysis of like our bodies are that map that I pointed out earlier, that if you tap into that map, is telling you more information in a dream beyond a diagnosis, beyond just these analytical approaches to health. And the third demon, as he says, is death, and death can also be an ally. And Robert Moss, so Psychopomp Workshop is basically his extended making death your ally. Like, that's like a 3-day workshop versus Psychopomp training was a 5-day workshop. And so we really went into his book, The Dreamer's Book of the Dead, and basically there is life after death, but sometimes not everyone knows that or believes that, and that's where you can be an opportunity, a guide, that Psychopomp, to assist people and help people even before they pass away by giving them a dream on what's on the other side. From Mendel's perspective, death is there to awaken, is there to press like a dream for realization. And I just wanted to put that out there for a lot of people, because that's a huge component to what it means to be human. And I just want to address that and give hope, hopefully, for people who need that.
Thank you. That is so important.
Yeah. So kind of the last thing I want to leave off on is this is a snapshot also from Instagram that I no longer have, but the consciousness sleeps in minerals, dreams in plants, wakes up in animals, and becomes self-aware in humans. By Rumi. Yeah. So the image behind is from Cameron Gray, no relation to Alex Gray, but he's a really cool digital artist. Came across him when I was really into Born of Osiris, and their music video, Follow the Signs. But I really love this quote because plants, I'm really currently engaging in, are teachers in dreaming. Yeah. There is a part of astrology that's called astroherbalism as well. Yep. And so I'm just going to put that as a plug, as for people who really might already have those skill sets in herbalism. That's one way to fuse into astrology, or another way to really tap into your own dreaming. And then the quote from Linda Hogan, most indigenous creation stories, humans were the last ones created. Around us are our many teachers.
That feels like a hug.
Yes, that's what I wanted it to be. So yeah, there's so many beings that want to see you thrive, that want the best for you. It could be your tree in your front yard. To the awesome 8 cats that you have, right? And your dog and the possums and all the other cool creatures that you have.
Jolene, she's left us. she's off, she's doing her thing.
She's doing her possum thing. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. So I just wanted to put that out there that, even if we have this story from the Sumerian that I shared Linda's saying with Robert at the Psychopomp workshop, and his response was, well, not everyone wanted humans, not everyone liked that humans were created. And that's when I learned the story of Enki from his perspective, that's how Enki saved humans. So I just wanted to put that out there that, we're not alone, and really to embrace that. So I believe that is all. Thank you, everyone, for your time, and especially sharing your stories in the comments. If you want more information from Robert, that is his website there. You'll find his upcoming workshops, on Shift Network. This is not sponsored. I'm just, trying to point you guys in the direction.
Oh, yeah.
Books, too. Check out your public library. Even, things like apps, Libby and Hoopla normally have a lot of his books. And then, of course, sign up at Starlight, like get your journal on, like share, maybe copy paste your comments into Starlight for your first journal experience and see what AI has to say about it all. So yeah, thank you again, Kathryn, for having me and taking me also on this journey.
Are you kidding? You just took us, like, I think I'm going to need days to integrate the bigness of the journey you just took us on, Colleen. Like, I was not, I knew you were going to bring it, but again, my dreams might have been constrained as to exactly how expansive of a journey you were going to take us on. And so I am just oozing gratitude. And this is the first podcast I can't wait to sit down and edit because I want to get this out into the world. And I think just one question I have to you to reflect back on your journey, because you just took us on a micro journey that I think is going to play out in every life who listens to this. When you shared with us at the beginning that in your, when you just dropped out of college and you were feeling like you wanted to leave this world, and the transformation that you've gone through in the last decade plus, and now you are truly showing us that you are a leader. Your personal power just like blasted out through the airwaves of what you just shared. Not everybody can be a psychopomp, be a guide through a multi-phase, multi-stage journey that's as expansive as what you just took us through. And so I think we all got a flavor of just the depths of transformation and the bravery that must have taken for you to lead yourself through all of that. How does it feel now to have such an expansive view of the world, to have such a connection to the plant kingdom? I know nature is so important in your life, and the animal kingdom, and to know that you can communicate between dimensions and between worlds, and that you truly will never die. When your body is ready to be done with this experience, you're off to something even more expansive. So can you share like what it be like? You're just really modeling a beautiful, powerful transformation, and you're just going to keep going. So do you have any resonant feelings of what that lands like for you?
Man, there's lots. So you might have to help me, like make sure I hit all the points.
Don't worry about hitting all the points. Just, okay. I just want, it's almost like a reflection of like deep respect for what you've gone through, mixed with the gratitude of what you just shared with us. That's only possible because you've developed this power through your transformation. And I'm so glad you stayed for the journey, because the waves are hitting.
Dude, thank you. Yeah. As I mentioned, I was hospitalized after kind of more of a suicide like experience on August 14th, 2010. And I basically met my own version of God, if you will, who told me like, yeah, it's not your time, and told me other things too that I like to keep to myself. I say them though to other people without like giving the context, because they were it was the essence of command. And it was in my own voice, but not my voice. And also this like calm, and it was all like I was in the thick of it, being drugged out by EMTs. And then when I came out of it, it took 5 men to like hold me down. I was pissed, like I still had my reaction. But like I came out of that, I guess, trying to give more context. Like I really encourage people to dive into knowing yourself. So I've given you the lens of active dreaming. There is also astrology. So when Kathryn says like being a leader, like I just recently learned from like Deborah Silverman. She's a great person for like introductory stuff, and it was her free like elemental challenge week that people, with first house, fourth house, 7th house, and 10th house placements, usually like you're gonna have to lead. And I have things in all of those houses, dude.
You're up this time.
Yeah, so there's that. I know you and I have also nerded out on Gene Keys by Richard Rudd, and that also plays off of planetary and as well as astrological signs, and the 25th gene key is in both my vocation and it's also my SQ, so spiritual intelligence, right? Yeah. And the 25th gene key is the sacred wound. So I have my own story. I gave you context on like basically the peak. There was a lot coming up to it, and there's been a lot coming out of it from there too. having a guide is wise, right? So this comes down to if you can get people who can basically listen to you. I feel like that is the essence behind a lot of wounding, and that was mostly out of all the different physical and life experiences, that the key thing behind it all was that I was emotionally on my own, and I didn't have people to hear me out, listen to early into my life, and that really set into me subconsciously and then just kind of impacted. And my way of problem solving that, more or less, as a kid was like, I'll be the best that I can fucking be. I'll do this and this and this and push through. And that wore me down.
Yeah.
You know, had that breaking point because, yeah, like behind it all, connection is a big theme for me. And so I would say, yeah, knowing yourself, research, you know, dive into these things, read about these things. You will be amazed by these feedbacks that other people have developed. These technologies. And it just starts to help you notice the themes. And you might not be in that place for your theme, and that's okay, but eventually it starts to build off of each other. And I think that would be the biggest advice that I have to, especially my peers and millennials, you know, and especially people, as I mentioned, the 87 to 89 range going their nodal return, is that you actually have so much guidance and support from everything that you've done from the time you were born up until where you are now. And if you're in a place where you have no fucking clue what's going to happen next, you are in a space of ripe opportunity, actually. I've heard people say, like, from the lens of, like, Jesus, like, that's why he loved being around people who were sick, down and out, you know, the outsiders cast out, because they're the ones closest to God. They're the ones at that last edge where, like, I have fucking nothing left. I don't know who myself to be anymore. You know, you're in that state of questioning. And I'd also say, like, a big aha for me was realizing when feeling suicidal, it is not that this body wants to die. It is that they're a part of you. There's something that you're doing or being that just is exhausted and it can't do and be anymore, and that's what needs to die. I would say listening to the Dangerous Old Woman NPR series that Dr. Clarissa Pinkola Estes did. There's one about the body. Highly recommend it. It is a loyal servant. It is here to serve and protect you. Yeah, I would. My biggest thing I've learned is that, you know, knowledge and growth. Those are my two big values in life. And I hope maybe if anyone has, like, resonates, like, maybe you too also value those things, and there is something there.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you so much, Colleen. You just gave so much today in this masterclass that I was not expecting, and absolutely just blew me away. And I'm serious that it's going to take me days to integrate everything that just happened in this session. I definitely am not the same from 1 p.m. 3 hours ago, and I am voraciously curious to devour Robert's books. And thank you for the decade that you've put in, or more, that you've put into your own study of this technology, this material. And thank you for letting it help you become everything that you've become and just gave us a glimpse into. It's badass to see you.
Thank you. Thank you for being, like, seeing me.
It's a pleasure. Fuck. Okay. Well, I'm just too excited. This was amazing, Colleen. You really did the damn thing. So I will leave links to find you, everything that you shared with us in the show notes. And like Colleen mentioned, just if you went on this journey with us, share your experience in the comments, because I'm going to feed it back to Colleen if it's on Instagram, and you'll see it if it's on YouTube. And let us feel the ricochets of your synchronicities. So yes. With that, we will wrap it up, because this was amazing. Thank you.
I'm going to close just from the help of the gatekeeper. Sorry.
Thank you.
May our doors, gates, and paths be open. May our doors, gates, and paths between the worlds be open. And may our doors, gates, and paths from those who wish to do us or anyone we love any harm be closed. May it be so.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye.